Put art on that.
6,000 a week, but they knocked it down to 5,500 because they hadn't had anybody there for 3 weeks. Came down a little bit. Twitty knocked off about 800 of their fee.
It was interesting. My dad was talking to my sister on a beard, and so they have the dunes,
Yeah.
and then
Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2.
the restaurant as part of the. They have the restaurant right on the beach. Okay, we're all here, so I'll go ahead and call to order the work session for October 11th, 2016 at 3:30 p.m. We have 3 items of discussion on the business agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, first up, manager evaluation instrument. Just as a way of background, state statutes only allow discussion of qualifications, competence, performance, et cetera, of a particular employee. General personnel policy issues may not be considered in closed session. The instrument that we use for a performance plan, or anybody uses for a performance plan, establishes a way to measure the qualifications and performance, and thus needs to be discussed in closed session. The instrument that I sent out to the board and Warren was the instrument that we used back in 2015-16. As everybody may remember, but just for point of emphasis, leading up to that, the town had not had in place evaluation forms for the town managers. So we made the investment of going to class at the School of Government last year, and then actually working, a couple of us worked on developing the instrument on an iterative way, and what you saw was what we used. I did notice that we were a little bit tardy in getting Warren's performance plan finalized, and then obviously adopted under the consent agenda at a regular meeting, which assuming we can get this accomplished today, we can do that next meeting. There's really only 2 minor modifications to this. One, Warren and team completed the memorialization of the financial policies, and so that no longer is a strategic initiative. That's wrapped up into our policies, and so we're down to the 6 2016-2017 strategic initiatives. So that was the minor change in section 1. And then under section 3, we had a discussion, and all of you should have I sent out to everybody the form. And then under section 3, since we talked during the evaluation process, the importance of communication, we expanded the performance level descriptors for communication and made it more specific. We got assistance from the School of Government and the people that put together the manager's class on that. And actually that we modeled it after, their recommendation was to model it after Catawba County. I believe it was Catawba County, and that's where this came from. So that's the working document. Comments, ideas for change, ideas for input, anything. Commissioner Fitzgerald, all good? Commissioner Burrow?
I think when we went through it for the actual evaluation, a lot of it was brought up at that time, and I was satisfied with what we discussed
Okay.
then and there.
Commissioner Warner?
I'm satisfied with what we did before.
Okay. Commissioner Stewart?
I have a comment, and after doing some benchmarking with some other towns, their suggestion was, and it may not be part of this, but part of the whole evaluation process, is for it is the opinion of many that I've talked to, and I can give you the towns that I've talked to, I don't have the list of them right now, where they did not go through the human resources director. Not any reflection on the human resources director, but because it puts them in direct contact with any negative and positive comments that may be on the person that they actually report to. And all the ones that I talked to did it a different way, and either through a board member, a mayor, or the attorney. And I would suggest that maybe we look at doing that.
That's fine. That's fine. That's how we do it. The only role that the HR director has is to keep on file, which we have to by law, the performance plan and the evaluation.
But everything's compiled, all the comments are compiled by the director, correct?
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay. That's-
Any kind of negative or positive that the other towns that I talked to, said that was a very, uncomfortable position to put a person in when they're reading information about the person they report to.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
That, I'm perfectly comfortable with,
Whatever.
with the board handling it, or the attorney, or, and not going through staff.
It's fine.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay. In fact,
I wouldn't want to be, personally, I wouldn't want to be reading all this stuff, not that there's so much
Yeah.
negative stuff about you or any, but I wouldn't want to be in the position if I reported to you to compile all of that.
Yeah.
Just, and other towns don't do it that way.
well, just to be clear, when we did it this way, it was a 50-50 split. Towns that do it, towns that don't. So I'm fine with whatever way we do it. And if that, I'm good with whatever the board wants to do. Perhaps we have it compiled by the attorney, because he's the only other person that reports to the board.
I would vote for the attorney.
Okay.
How many hours does it take?
It doesn't take long to compile it. It's more a matter of staying on top of
How long
it.
does it take to compile the evaluation together?
Bigger thing is staying on top of it and making sure everybody responds. That's, so, okay. Does anybody have any comments or any changes? Commissioner Stewart, any changes to the form? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Hunt?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have consensus then that the form is good as is, and so we'll put this on the consent agenda for October 25th. So thank you. Next up is a discussion as a follow-up from the last board meeting. Suggested changes to the art policy. The last board meeting, Commissioner Fitzgerald has the responsibility of pulling together some information for us, and so we can reach consensus. Commissioner Fitzgerald asked for some help on some additional work that was being done or looked into through the League of Municipalities on where committees and commissions are going, so.
Why don't you go ahead?
You want me to?
I'll just
Okay. All right, so what you have in the presentation is the background information from the 13th, where the rewrite was presented to the Board of Commissioners, feedback, and we were all asked to provide feedback. On 9/27, the town manager presented that feedback, and the consensus was to not move forward with recommended changes. There's some additional items that must be looked at as with whatever change that the board wants to move forward with. The approved art plan calls for long-term advisors to the town on community art, and where that sits and what that group does is part of the art plan. The other thing, the 2017 legislative session is, and this is a document that is really an act to reorganize and clarify statutes regarding local planning and development regulation. And basically, the legislature, as well as all of the interested parties, recognize that over time, the need to consolidate a lot of the conflicting statutes, et cetera, it's long overdue. And so that is on the docket for this year and has a high probability of succeeding because there's nothing inflammatory in it. One of the most important things in there, though, as it pertains to whatever we do going forward, is there's an article in there on boards and organizational arrangements, and specifically, they are putting out there the Appearance Commission. I've included just in the PowerPoint presentation the description that they have. They then have 3 pages of responsibilities behind it, and they also have some language in there that the Appearance Commission could ultimately, if for a town our size, the Historic Preservation Commission and the Appearance Commission could merge into one, based upon skill, based upon primarily based upon skills to be able to do both appearance across the town, which includes not just downtown, not just art, but across the town in an appearance standpoint, as well as the historic preservation part of it. And so we've got some work to do to understand that. As that comes forward, and work with the league to understand and make sure that we know what it is and what's best for Waxhaw. So what Commissioner Fitzgerald really put in place was, for now, the approach. And you want to talk through that, Paul?
Yeah. Basically, it's pretty simple. There's a couple spots on the art policy and the art plan where they reference to the beautification committee, which we no longer have. And we just need to change that verbiage in both of them to the P&R committee, which is Parks and Rec. So we need to just change the verbiage in those plans for now, and that would hold us over until we decide where we're going to go with the Appearance Commission, because it's eventually going to end up in the Appearance Commission because it's an obvious fit. And that all these things are just, this is kind of hold on right now, and then until we get to the budget situation for 2017, 2018, and then we'll probably convert it into the Appearance Commission. That's basically what I think that we both talked about, that it's basically, it's part of Main Street, part of Parks and Rec and Cultural Arts, part of, it's all a mix of this conglomeration is what the Appearance Commission is, and also part of streetscapes. So that's basically all that melds together. It's basically what Beautification Committee was originally. It's what it is. So at this
Far more expansive, though.
more expansive,
with-
goes across the whole town instead of just centrally in the downtown area.
And with some budget to go with it and
Correct.
things like that.
More ammunition. So that's what my recommendation is, to just change the verbiage in both plans to Parks and Rec, whatever it is, community arts or whatever.
Yeah, so there's, as
Very
written here.
little. There's like 6 places, I think,
Yeah.
in both plans.
The, the more permanent fix would come up during the budget planning cycle, where we actually look at that appearance commission and see where it actually fits and how it fits. And we're going to talk about the other boards. There's other boards and committees that are going to be impacted with this legislative action. And we'll get more information at the league conference on this, but that was the other part of this, that there's a more long-term, let's shoot for the long-term permanent fix as part of the budget planning cycle and make sure we do it with an eye towards our strategic initiatives and not just off to the side. So throw it open for discussion.
Just a question, if you would. As you move forward with the League of Municipalities, I would imagine we're in the very early stages of what the legislature intends, but would this also impact?
Actually not, because this
Okay.
has been worked on for 3 years.
Okay,
So
so
that's
they're
why they
farther
feel
down.
pretty comfortable that
Okay.
it's going to come to fruition this year.
Is there much more detail coming forth or forthcoming from them as to what the legislature sees an appearance commission looking like, or how it would appear?
Yeah, I have the lined out copy, and I've asked them to, by the end of the month, if they can give us the revised, what's it look like, so we can get, not only for this, but for all the other commissions.
Sure,
But yeah, it's a lot closer to finalization than,
okay,
and we'll get that to the board by the end of the month.
okay, because, yeah, that's going to affect all the other boards and committees. Okay.
There's basically 4 major changes. The Appearance Commission, the Planning Board has some significant change. We'll talk about the Planning Board later, and the Board of Adjustment and whether or not you want to move that in. They put more clarification around Historic Commission and talked about how Historic and Appearance can work together, but it's skill-based driven or capability-based driven instead of just a committee and, put people on it kind of thing. So, which, that puts pressure, as we look at it, on the OAC to really get more skill-based, et cetera. So, other comments, questions, thoughts?
I have a question. I just need to understand why we're going back to where we were before, rather than move forward with the new art policy where it combines everything. Commissioner Fitzgerald.
Well, first of all, the art policy and art plan are 2 separate documents. Basically, the art policy is policies and rules and regulations. Art plan is how to actually get art into the town, and that's basically what it is. The art plan is relatively a new plan for the town. It was started in 2012, approved by the Board of Commissioners in 2013, and it won a state award for being forward-thinking, and I don't understand why we would throw it out after we won a state award. We also paid $19,000 for that plan, and I don't think we should just eliminate it. If we do that, and we also need to eliminate the Parks and Rec master plan and the small town area plans, because that's what we're doing. We're eliminating our previous forward thinking, the plans that we've already paid for. We had a professional group do it, and I think it was a great plan. It just never's been really implemented.
Well, I understand where you're coming from. I just think that it being one policy, and I agree, there could be some streamlining in the current one, but, I think it's a good plan, and I think that as we move forward and not going backward, to implement new new policies, new ideas, and new things, and, I'm still in favor of the one that we have, that we've spent thousands of dollars in, taxpayers' money on.
Well, in all these, we've spent,
In building this new one.
in all of them, we've spent taxpayer dollars. At the last board meeting, the consensus was, I thought you had said the consensus was not to move forward at this time. And I think what Paul is saying is, how do we bring all this together and make it work at budget time as we move forward and incorporate it into our strategic initiatives? I think that's what you're
Exactly.
saying, and bring it forward then.
But we need to do something in the meantime. The Band-Aid is to use what we have already on the shelf and assign it to a board and committee. And basically, we're assigning it to the Parks and Rec and Cultural Arts. And that's basically the committee where it was intended to when we abolished the beautification committee. And I think that's where it should stay until we get this new committee, which is the Appearance Commission, which would be, it would fall under their guidance at that time. And then we could give them some guidance on what we're looking for. Sorry, I forgot to turn on my speaker. What we're looking for and what we want the policy and art policy have changed at that time. Right now, the art plan really has never been, it got shuffled around and it got misplaced, like a lot of our plans have. And at this time, we just need to have it in some place where it can actually be used, because it's not a bad plan. Something that wins a state award, I don't think you want to throw out.
Commissioner Hunt?
So I agree with Commissioner Fitzgerald, certainly on the part that the plan was in place. And much like a great deal of our plans, we never had line item budgets for them. We never funded the plans. They were just created, paid for, and put on a shelf. And I think obviously, we've in the past at least year have been taking those plans off the shelf one by one and assigning them in the budget each year to, here's some dollar amounts to go behind the sidewalk plan, the Parks and Rec, actually creating the Parks and Rec department, and actually assigning budget items to it. To your point, Commissioner Stewart, though, I have a question in the taxpayer dollars spent. And again, I just may need some refreshing. I don't recall that this board ever gave direction to rewrite the plan as a whole or to start that process. And again, I understand that there was a point in time when we went back to change some verbiage, but a wholesale rewrite, I don't recall us giving that direction.
I understand it was the last board and the last, former mayor. And I think, Mayor Maher, you would probably know more about that than I would, as far as where that originated. To the extent of how to get artwork into the police department.
Getting our work into the getting our work into the police department and rewriting the policy were two different things. The our work into the police department was a budgetary item that, depending upon who you talked to, they thought there was there and wasn't there. The interim manager went and said that he would put the money in there, and we've been through this. He admitted he made a mistake in the closeout. He never moved the money over. Then you came on board. But he did commit to the money for the police department, but it had nothing to do with the policy. It was, you had Mike McLaurin leaving, you had a board member resigning, you had utter chaos going on, and Greg said, okay, we will get the $5,000 assigned and be done with it. And then it didn't happen and you were greeted with that as you came on board. That had nothing to do with the policy part of it. That was just resolving the $5,000. The policy part of it was update to reflect the new committee. That was,
Okay, I understand.
So-
So going back.
but there was a mistake, and it was admitted on the $5,000 that there was nothing captured, and Greg made the effort to to address it, and it fell through the cracks.
So is that going to be addressed?
The 5,000 on the police department, I mean,
It's a budgetary decision of the board.
Yeah.
But, and I would take responsibility for, we were trying to be accommodating of work that was being done.
Right.
And we should have, it'll be reflected in my performance evaluation next year. I should have taken a timeout, brought to the board, this is where we're headed, or this is where the Park and Rec Advisory Committee is heading. Are y'all comfortable with this? And I didn't do that, so this is where we end up. So I will take responsibility for that.
there's responsibility everywhere. So what's on the table from Commissioner Fitzgerald is take this up as part of our strategic initiatives, natural budget process, accounting for the legislative changes that appear to be coming forward, and then actually assess what, if any, budget recommendations do we want to make vis-a-vis art. I will point out a couple things that, on both instances, that it came before the board, before I was on the board, in terms of adding money, a percentage of money to an art budget, it was voted against by the town board each time, both back in 2010 and 2014, 2013, then 13, 14, when the art plan came forward. That was the one piece that they did not, when I went back and looked through it, so.
In fact, I was chair at the beautification committee, and I was the one asking for the percentage.
And you didn't get money then?
They didn't get money then, and I think that at this time, if we really want to be in our community, we should go 2%, because that's what Big Bad Charlotte is doing up the street. And if we want to be considered our community, then we need to do that at budget time. We're organizing a budget, not in the middle of a year. And we also need to discuss that. And there was money for art in the beautification committee. Whether you knew it or not, the beautification committee got a block of money every year. But then they also had in there, they had sub-items that they were buying or supplying for the town. And one of them was public art. The other thing was benches. The other thing was trees and bushes. There was several different things for the beautification committee. And the other thing was to enhance recycling too, because that was part of the beautification committee, whether you realize it or not, too. So the budget just kind of, when we changed committees, it didn't transfer. Somehow it never got transferred, and it never got into a budget anywhere. So that's why it just fell apart. Actually, the last item before, when I left, they were working on a statue that's a bench and a statue made out of brick. And they didn't have enough money for 1 year, so they asked, I think it was you, maybe it was the interim town manager, if they could hold over the money from the previous year so they could do it with the money for the coming year when they consolidate. But that's when we transferred the beautification committee in 2 different committees, and it never got done. So we had preliminary work to commission an artist to actually have a bench done that actually is of a child and 2 children, I think, playing, that's made out of brick, red brick, but we don't know where right now, because of the grant money that we got for downtown, we don't know exactly where to place it, because we need to make sure we're not going to place it in a place where the sidewalks are going to be improved. So that's where we're at in that. So there is money for public art, but it's kind of hidden. It's like a sub-line underneath the line. So we do put money away for it, but it hasn't been shown as art, public art. I guess I don't know if we need to have that line, or we should give the money to a committee, and that basically that's where it was. The money was in Parks and Rec, and it's actually there still. So it just hasn't come to fruition because of many facets of things going on.
And when the fiscal year ends, the money that hasn't been expended rolls in the fund balance, so the board would need to reappropriate.
Basically, what
So what do we want to do? Yes.
So, after hearing Commissioner Fitzgerald's explanation of the question that was asked, I'm in agreement with what's listed here to go back in and make those changes. I'm also in agreement with to analyze the legislative changes and the town needs over the next year. Folks that have contacted me, emailed, talked to me in person, said, that the original intent was every 5 years to go back and readdress or look over the policy and the plan again, and we're right about at that time frame. So within this next year, if we do that, we go back and we analyze, we look at, we bring in what the legislative changes are going to be, and for the next budget year, we either revise or tune up or, maybe even completely change the art and the art policy, the art plan, but we spend this year doing that. That's my first thought. My second thought, Commissioner Stewart had mentioned a $5,000 issue that was brought up that may have fell through the cracks with the transition. Didn't happen. I don't know the exact details that I recall on that. I would assume it was from the art jury or the art commission at that point trying to get art in this building. But if there was something that was promised or something was there and didn't happen, I'm all for let's make that right. I know we can't do it at this workshop, but I'm for an agenda item tonight to put that on there to transfer those funds to meet that obligation that we said we would do.
Well, I think the question was, how can we get the art into this building? And the answer was, the art plan needs to be redone before we can do that. And I think that may have come from the former mayor.
Okay.
But it was still, that's the way it came.
Right.
For the art policy to be defined and be rewritten so that could get those.
But the agreement,
Look at that art to choose, not that they're gonna choose any particular one, but to have the option to choose from the artists that have done paintings in this building.
Right.
That's how that originated, from what I understand.
and no one was privy to that conversation from the previous mayor. I will tell you what Greg and Chief talked about was, we will get art in here if we get the $5,000. The chief was not obsessed with having the art policy updated. He just wanted to make sure it was public safety appropriate for this building. That was his big concern. And if the 5,000 would have been allocated then, they probably would have done it then without any change.
And to that point, again, I don't obviously work for the city of Charlotte at the Charlotte Fire Department, but I know that each of the fire departments, the chief encourages art in a form that shows pride in their individual station. He doesn't come along and say, you're going to get this art because I'm the chief or we're the art commission. It's whatever the individual, and again, appropriate within reason, obviously, but pride in individual station. And I'm not trying to put words in the chief's mouth because we haven't had this conversation, but I would only imagine that, again, he's looking for police-oriented, public safety, showing community interaction. Again, if you look around at some of the pieces that are hanging in this building, and again, art comes in many forms. It's not something to me that I created or that an artist created, but if you go down the other hall, there's the old police station sign from the early days. So
I believe there was certain criteria for this building. I would have to look back or ask Chief Ice, but,
and I,
there was criteria.
that was created by Chief Ice.
right.
It wasn't created by the art plan or the art policy. That was created by the Chief Ice. And I know that was talked about for many years. It's been many years now. It's not been just last year
So
or
again,
two.
back to my second
I
suggestion.
think I'm in agreement with you that we need to bring it up tonight and vote on it tonight, whether we want to go ahead and pay that $5,000 and get it done. Because it really has nothing to do with our policy or our plan. It's just something that it fell through the cracks.
Well, can I make a suggestion before we just overreact? Chief Ice is currently having some a medical procedure done with his kidney stones, it would probably be nice to have him back into the conversation so we get it right. Could we maybe do it for the next meeting? I mean, he'd agree to anything right now. But, and to be clear, part of the confusion was, if you recall at the time, we evacuated the old town hall. Suddenly, the upstairs became quasi-public area, even though wasn't long-term to be public, and so there was confusion there as we were trying to decide the town hall plan at that time. And so the key there was, he was fine with the public side. Let's make sure we're in agreement on the public, where the public side is. So Commissioner Burrow.
I think with what the legislature has before it and what we're about to undertake, I think it would just be best for us to do with this, like we're doing with the other committees, is look at them in an over-organized fashion, make sure we're not building in conflicts, that we're not overthinking certain things. It seems like this building's art got overthought. I mean, if you just need $5,000 for art that the chief, we don't need a committee to tell us how to do that. So I would like to just do this going forward and come up with a better overall appearance.
Yeah, I don't think it was overthought. I think it was you had an interim town manager also acting as the
Right.
director of planning,
Right.
trying to put in 80 hours a week.
Right.
I mean, so, where are we? We're going to make a budget amendment for the 25th to allocate $5,000, a suggestion. Will you help us with that?
Unless I can talk you out of it.
Okay, unless,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
Okay, and then for now, there seems to be I'm asking, is there consensus on Commissioner Fitzgerald's simple changes to the wording until we get to the permanent fix at the budget cycle timeframe? And this would be action that Chaplain would make to the document more than anything. Is that where everybody is?
Yes, that's where I am.
Okay. And then I will make sure that I get from the league by the end of the month, the revised Parents Commission, Board of Adjustment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. That was the quick one. Okay. Your call at the last board meeting is getting some discussion from the various boards and committees on just some clarity and direction in terms of some of the challenges that are out there with boards and committees. And so some of the things that have come up is, can you clarify the role of the board liaison and where is it needed or where isn't it needed? The planning board, you and Jim are already, Commissioner Warner are already working with the Central Atlanta Council of Government in terms of an engagement on how do we address and improve the planning board. My only comment there is, tonight you're addressing some attendance issues that have been brought up. On the consent agenda, we're moving one member and moving an alternate up to the full board. We need to get the word to the COG that they should be looking at this upcoming legislation for the impact. And after tonight, the planning board will be down one member. Historic Preservation Commission, we're woefully behind here in terms of direction from the town board, the Board of Commissioners, and a committed work plan. We need to make some decisions there in terms of what we want them to do, what guidance we want to give them, fully staff them, et cetera. They're impacted by the comprehensive plan that'll get looked at and approved this month. They also could be impacted by the upcoming legislation. And depending upon how you look at it, they're at least down 2 members and possibly 3 members in terms of fully staffing that committee. The Organizational and Advisory Committee, They, because their work effort has changed dramatically, they no longer are making recommendations around Main Street and looking as a part of all of the various committees of Main Street. They're basically now making recommendations to the full board on candidates, on people, for boards and committees, and staffing of volunteers, et cetera. And so, from their perspective, one of the things that have bubbled up is that the integrity of their process. They think they should be presenting that to the full board when it comes forward, just out of fairness for all the applicants and the process. And they are currently down one, but depending upon how we do the Historic Preservation Commission, they could be down 2 members, and so we have staffing there. And then on Parks, Culture, and Recreation Committee, to a T, their chairman and a few of their members have reached out. They're looking for clarity on role, responsibility, and work plan. And if you look at their work plan, and this is on us, the work plan reads, finish Nesbitt, it reads like a staff work plan. It reads like Natalie's performance plan. Here's $1.6 million in funds, and will you finish Nesbitt Park and Town Creek Park and design this, and et cetera. And in there, there was also the statement of procuring art in dollars for that. The art and beautification interim to these structural changes, we already talked about that. And I can't tell from the numbers that I've seen, they're either down 2 or down 3 members. And that would have to be validated by the OAC and then staffed. So when you kind of look at some of the actions we need to talk about, we need the OAC to validate immediate needs and backfill. Depending upon which numbers you use on which website or which spreadsheet, we're down 6 to 8 people. And 6 to 8 people with some skill sets around and on historic preservation and on the planning board that are non-trivial. Planning board's down 1, historic preservation 2 to 3, and OAC, et cetera. We've been through that. Roles and responsibilities and work plans. The planning board, Fred, you want to talk about where you are with that, or where the COG is with that?
Well, COG will probably be calling most all of you this week to find out from the Board of Commissioners and members of the staff what they feel, what you feel the planning board should be doing. And what finding overall, and Jim and I have been talking about this, is that probably when we started looking at the planning board and what could happen to it or what could be done to improve it, we didn't know a lot about it ourselves, even though we've been on it, and found there was sort of a lack of direction from this board as to what it wants its planning board to do or be, and how it wants it staffed. And after struggling with that for a little while, we did reach out to COG, and they are helping us. And I think what we're finding is that the people from the Council of Government are working with other municipalities, working with other counties, working on other boards, helping out, and far more knowledgeable than the 2 of us, and are really contributing to what, the training that's being done for the immediate training, for the medium-term training, the long-term training. And by the time they finish what they're doing, we'll have a rewritten set of rules and procedures for the planning board, but we'll also have something presented to us that's going to help us figure out what we really want the planning board to do. And along with what the legislature is working on, we should end up with a really good organization. And with the help of the OAC, and I've seen the people that they are bringing forward for the planning board, they're very, very qualified. I mean, we have 3 attorneys, a couple of very prominent engineers, and financial people. So the status of the members of the board has really been improved by, actually recruiting people, not just taking the applications that show up. So what I see in talking with the mayor a little bit, the same thing is, the same kind of process is happening with the Main Street Committee. But we have to get beyond ourselves and get outside help to help us figure out what we want these different committees to do. And having done that, we should be a lot more effective.
One of the interesting things in this potential future legislation is, we're updating or will be approving our comprehensive plan. One of the things this legislation does is put the responsibility for preparing, reviewing, maintaining, monitoring, and periodically updating a comprehensive plan. So they take ownership of the comprehensive plan,
Yeah.
so it stays a living document, which has been, that's why we're redoing ours right
Right.
now. As a for
That's
instance.
what I found in talking to other municipalities. Some of them, their planning boards do most everything that the legislature allows. And they have staffed them with very highly qualified people, and they do. They go out and they do the comprehensive plans, they do the updates for the code, and they start them, and they carry them through, and they finish them. I mean, all we've done with our planning board so far is get them to pick the consultant for the comprehensive plan, and then we turned it over to another committee. And as far as the UDO went, there was a little more involvement in picking the consultant, but after that, we didn't use them. So the work ended up with us, and we really should be delegating it, but we need to think about what we want them to do, and find the right people and let them do it.
We also have work to do on the historic preservation. I'm going to show you a little bit to show the difference on the parks, culture, and recreation side of things, and then how we're going to go about evaluating the legislation and its impact on Waxhaw, how we go about doing that, and reach some form of agreement on the liaison role and how we actually get to that. One of the things, just for kicks, as an example, I went around and just looked at, okay, our Parks Chair Spelling, Park and Rec member John Cena, former member Rob Figueroa, a few others have expressed some of the things what is our role? Can you explain it? It doesn't feel right. And if you talk with the Parks and Rec director, the staff struggles with it as well. And so I went and looked at a number of different municipalities and kind of laid out what is advisory, what is the role, and what do some of the duties look like. And as you start to read through it, you see the difference in terms of what a advisory board does versus where Parks and Rec has evolved to, primarily because there was no department when they were first formed. I know I sat on that committee and we were, hey, would you go do the work with this consultant? You were the staff. It was, I can remember the meeting when it came in and said, you got $300,000 to build a dog park, go do it. I mean, didn't know what the heck that meant, but somebody had come up with a check and said, build a dog park. And that was more the mode of operation for them. And so now, as you look at this advisory, the role and duties, the duties tend to be more in the role is on the need, not on what is really the heavy lifting that a staff person or a department would do in terms of the construction documents and those kind of things. So needs act as a communication channel to promote the town's park and rec plans versus, promote the plans, and then obviously advise the board on matters that come before them. And the best example I have of this was 3-4 years ago when both the athletic barn, and the Waxhaw Athletic Association came forward and said, the agreement doesn't work. We got a policy problem with the agreement. Can the Park and Rec Board help us get an agreement that works for everybody? And again, that was a function of the town growing, and which was a very legitimate policy matter that needed to be looked at, and it was looked at and addressed, and that kind of jumped into then Natalie was named director, and she took it from there. But at the core, that was the community bringing forward. We're having trouble getting access to fields, yet they're sitting idle, yet we don't know how to reserve them, yet what's the policy here? And that led to a new contract being developed, a new system being built, et cetera. That's all good stuff. That's stuff that a committee, with the ears close to the ground can bring forward to a board and say, hey, can you look at the policy issue that's really impacting it? But those kind of things, I think, is where, personal opinion, where we need to start thinking in terms of what an advisory board does versus maybe where we've allowed the Park and Rec Department or Park and Rec Advisory Board to drift to. Because when you look at the words that are in their work plan, it is finish Nesbitt Park. And I don't know how a committee finishes the park. Finish Town Creek Park. Design the 34 acre. I don't know how a committee that we allowed that to float too far, and that's on nobody but us as a town board. Commissioner Hunt.
Is it that we allowed it to drift there, or, and again, out of necessity, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, without a department in place, without a department head, a staff member in place, that this was their role? I didn't serve on that committee, you did, but is that where it was, and we just never redressed it, went back to it, revised it, took a look, and said, okay, now we have a staff member, we have a department head, we have a whole department, we have an expert that we are educating every day with our funds in this field. Is it time to go back and revisit that to their role and, either, change it or look at something different?
Well, that's kind of where we are, and the words that I'm using here are what were presented to us as part of their work plan for this year, and we didn't say anything, so that's on us. I mean, that's on us. We should have caught it. I could have caught it. Anybody could have caught it. We didn't, and so now we have the opportunity to do a reset, to your point, and help them. And this morning, Manager Wood, Director Jackson, and I spent some time with the YMCA. On the way back, Chairman Spelling called me and said, where are you on this? We want to get this right. So their heart's in the right place, that they want to be able to be an advisory board. They're genuinely looking for direction. So, so the question is.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Let me just kind of define what I'm looking for. We're just looking for, we need to define what their role is now.
Correct.
Is that what I'm understanding? They're really, take the ball and run with it. We need the money, let's take it and do this. But now, no, you're not doing that anymore.
You're not staff.
Yeah, you're
an
going
advisory
to tell
board.
us where we think we need to help, where you need help and what, kind of you're an observer now rather than a doer. Is that a good description?
I don't know that it's an observer. If you look at the duties on this.
Conscientious observer.
Huh?
Conscientious observer. Yeah.
Or objector. Now, if you look at the list of duties up here that's in the presentation, et cetera, when you look at those, I don't look at those as, I look at those as very active things that would seem plausible, at least on the surface, for a Park and Rec Advisory Board to be thinking about. What the needs of what are the needs that they're hearing from the community? How are they representing our overall Park and Rec strategy? serve as a sounding board for the staff. Bring forward some suggestions for where they see some gaps in policies. Second to last item in terms of citizen groups, we have a number of fields across a number of entities. Do they have any thoughts there, to make suggestions to the board?
Well, I mean, you've attended their meetings. I guess what I'm looking at is what kind of resources do they have to make, oh yeah, we need to go here? Or, is it, Ms. Jackson's job to bring up, what are your opinions on all these above items? Do we need to have a smorgasbord for them to go through?
Need to have a smorgasbord.
I guess that's not the right word, but
There's a,
yeah, I'm just trying to
What's-
put some, we can talk esoteric words all day long, but
Right.
let's put it down. Where exactly do we go from here?
I think we're violating unity of command. We have two chains of command, and that's not fair to anyone. And the whole purpose of being here is to, how do we go forward? And to John's point, what they were doing 2 years ago, before there was a Park and Rec department, was acting like partly like a Park and Rec department too. But their role has changed. Now we need to define it, to your point, Jim.
So how do you want to do that?
Well, and I guess to Fred's point, that the command thing, so we've got a board that reports to this board, or a committee, and then we've got a staff that reports to the manager who reports to us. And everybody's going, who's where? Who says what, if who? It seems to be very untidy at best.
We're going to have the same
I
thing
don't
with every-
disagree with you. That's why they came forward and said, we're untidy. Would you help tidy us
Right.
up? I mean, that was their request.
We're going to have the same thing with every board and committee.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. We're not just talking about the Parks and Rec.
Right.
No, we're talking
This was
about-
just one example. Yeah.
The
Right.
one that's coming up that's gonna be very important is the Main Street Board,
Absolutely,
because they're gonna cover a wide range of things.
Absolutely.
Not just Parks and Rec.
right.
And in my mind, and being in the Parks and Rec, and I've noticed, there's been some confusion, but, and not pointing to anybody, but my thought was always, that is an advisory board. They're to come up with advisory ideas, so to speak, and bring it back to the people that they report to, which is the board. And that the town liaison is there to carry that through back
That's
to
the
the town
communication
manager,
back and forth.
then we work together, whether that hasn't been happening or not, but, maybe not, but I think that's what we need to get clear exactly what is what, because this next board we're going to be coming up with is really going to be, in my mind, more important than any of them.
You're correct. And I think back to what you were talking about 20 minutes ago, Steve, is what is the role of the liaison too? We need to define that. What is, I'm still not really sure what being the liaison to the planning board means exactly. Jim and I talk about it, and we go back and forth to Warren and everybody else, but it would be nice if there was some codification of what a liaison's supposed to do.
Well, my definition of being the liaison is to go, to be there at each meeting and to listen and watch what's going on within the thing. If they need guidance in a way of policy and with the Parks and Rec, when people would come and ask me, they said, who do we report to? So you report to the board. Natalie reports to her manager. This committee reports to the board.
Right.
And, but not get involved in, as far as Mr. Spelling, the chair of the meeting, running that meeting.
Correct. I agree with you.
And that got convoluted there for a while. And I can see where the confusion came. But as far as the liaison, what I thought as a new commissioner, what my job was, is still what I think it was, is to be there and to offer suggestions if I'd like, or, policy guidance, and to tell them, guide them in where they're supposed to report to.
How about the other part is to come back to this group and keep everybody here updated too, and that's what we're trying to do. You're doing that, we're trying to do that with planning board also.
Fundamentally, the liaison represents the board at any one of those meetings. That's the fundamental foundation point for it. Some boards need more advice and counsel than others. Some have been able to get away from it. Some require minimal interference, like the planning board or the board of adjustment, or the ABC board. I mean, only as required do you get pulled in, kind of thing. So,
Well, and there also needs to be the level of communication as well, because if you don't know something's going on as liaison, you don't know what's going on. So the communication level needs to be there all the way around, from the advisory board to the staff, and inclusive of the information flow.
and I think where we are is each one of these boards, what's their role, and then what's the role of the liaison to support that role is really what it boils down to. The OAC is dramatically different from the Park and Rec, is dramatically different from the ABC board. And so the ABC board, you don't have a need, because they're legislated dramatically different, to be at the meeting or provide advice. So, and that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. And that gets to, we all have to have, as Commissioner Stewart says, the communication, and then build that trust and confidence in the relationships that go along with it. It gets back to, and we're going to get into the Main Street Advisory Board here in a minute, but, okay, we talked. Now, what are some thoughts as to how best begin to attack this?
May I say a few words? The liaison is there to observe and to listen to the board, not to put their opinion across. If there's a question about policy, they should know what that policy is. And it should not be a forced issue of the commissioner said or the commissioner say. It should be, we're there to listen, to hear what, because they're supposed to be a branch of the citizenry of the town, how to provide better services to the town and how to make our policies improve to the town. That's basically, in a nutshell, all boards and committees. If I'm right, that's the way I look at it. Maybe I look at things very short, confined things, but really, we're there to listen to the board and committees. If they want us to speak, that's fine. If they want us to talk about something that was approved by the board in a previous meeting, then we're there too if they want us to talk about it. But if it's not been approved by the board, we really can't talk about as being a whole board, because we're just talking as individuals. And we're not individuals, we're one board.
Well, I think it differs on different boards as well, and what that board's trying to do. For Parks and Rec, for instance, as a liaison, sometimes, and I know Jim may agree, there's some things that are said in there, and as far as not really in an advisory or liaison board level, but sometimes you just can't help but say something if you see them going down a rat hole. I mean, I, for one, I'm gonna speak up and say something. It may be an opinion, but it's gonna come to me eventually anyway as the board to share, but, I don't think that we need to saddle ourselves with sitting there silently and not saying anything.
I agree with you on some points, but other points, you have to bite your tongue sometimes. You have to let them make some decisions. You have to listen to what they're saying, and you have to see, maybe look at it a different point of view. Sometimes we get into a rut and we see it, we're just going with our blinders on, going down the road, and we don't see the whole view. So you have to listen to what they're saying. If they get out of control, sometimes you want to talk to the chair on the side and say, maybe this is not what we're looking for. I'll have to get with the board and see if that's what we're really looking for. And not embarrass the chair, because it's their meeting to run, but you don't want to, you're kind of like an advisory position to help them along, but you're not there to hinder them or undermine their authority, in my opinion.
Well, we got to go back to what Jim said a few minutes ago. When we as a board establish what we want this particular committee to do, and if they have the framework, then they know what we want them to do. We know they know how we want them to act, or the different duties that we've given them. Then the board, the liaison to the board is just a lot simpler, because either they're doing these things or they aren't. And what's probably happened with Parks and Rec is that the duties have gotten very fuzzy, and it hasn't transitioned from one format to another yet. So again, back to basics. What do we want the different boards to do?
Again, going back to Historic Preservation Commission, that I've talked numerous times with Steve, and he's talking about heritage, and heritage is not historical. It's our heritage. It's part of our culture. It's not a building. Heritage preservation is a building, a structure, a piece of property, is not culture. And we need, if that's what we're looking for, then we need to change that so that we're looking for a cultural thing rather than buildings and structure, because it's really been designed by the state that it's structures and how to preserve those structures and so forth. It's not a cultural thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think they're two separate things, and the comp plan pretty much lays out where we're headed with, at least strategically, from historic preservation. So the Park and Rec Advisory Board meets next Wednesday. What do we tell them they're supposed to do?
Well, nothing at this, don't tell them nothing.
Well, I mean, what are we going to tell them? I mean,
I think it's very clear, and Jim, you and I are the liaisons, but I think it's very clear that Tony, and I've talked to Tony, that he is the Parks and Rec chair. He needs to run the meeting. He needs to take the initiative. He needs to step up to the plate and sometimes maybe be more forceful and control the meeting. Sometimes maybe from getting out of hand or loud, or that's his job.
that's his job, but what is the Park and Rec Advisory Board's responsibility? That's what they're asking for. They're saying it's not clear. We have a work plan that says fix Nesbitt Park, finish Nesbitt Park. Is that their job?
And but what I was saying by nothing is we're not going to solve it in the half hour today. To tell them by Wednesday. So
No, I know that.
sit tight, stay where you are, continue meeting. We're going to come up with a plan to give you a new definition.
Okay, that's statement one. Now, statement two, question two, how are we going to do that?
Well, so question two, though, in my mind also, we've talked about, Commissioner Stewart had mentioned earlier, she had done some research into various communities, various towns, and I've looked at some also. One I found, the boards and committees do not have a board liaison. They have chairs. The chairs report to the full board, not on a every week, every time we meet, but a quarterly basis or a every other month basis, to then get the full board's input, that we're not funneling or channeling down through one individual. It's done in that way that there's no liaisons. They just come, the board chairs come to the full board.
Just go back a little bit. When Jim and I started the business with the planning board, I mean, we really didn't know what to look for. We called different towns, we asked them all sorts of questions, and we got all sorts of information, and some of it was great, some of it was not so great. And then as we struggled through it, it was suggested we get a hold of COG. And once we introduced that element, that outside objective element, the professional element, people that do this every day, because there's no continuity on this board. I mean, we could all be gone, at the end of 4 years or sooner, who knows? But the continuity is there with a group like COG. Is there another group that is more attuned to parks and recreational matters that we should be talking to? COG may not be the answer. The school of government may not be the answer. Is there someone else that we could go to, another organization that would help us frame what we want to do? It's been a very helpful process with the planning board. We're not there yet, but we're a lot farther down the road because we have an outside group helping us. They're not as fast as I'd like them to be, but we're getting there. Anybody you know of, Mr. Mayor?
There are consulting groups that have, retired Parks and Rec directors and that sort of thing that would, through their experience, you could interview some of those, and if you want to go down that road to get some assistance. I'm not sure what the COG's background is on Parks and Rec.
Not minimal.
It's success, there's success coming from them because, with the planning board, but it's the same method, just different players.
But you determined, an issue maybe in organization with the planning board by being there as a liaison.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that the keeping the liaison with the boards is very important.
I would agree with you also.
Well, my only point to that, why I suggested that, is we look back again, 3 or 4 pages back, the Organizational and Advisory Committee wants to change the process to ensure the integrity of the process. They feel like that it's better to bring it to the full board versus funneling through a filter of an individual that feels.
It's not, it wasn't, they're evaluating candidates, and so they bring a slate of candidates forward that they feel should be brought to the board for discussion, not pre-released or anything like that. That's more, that's not the same as the Park and Rec or the planning board. That's different, and again, their role was completely modified with the Main Street work that was done. So that's why they, as they're working through that, that's why they're suggesting that. And again, that's to allow them to keep, that's how they look at it, to get their work done in a very free flowing way to make the best advice, bring the best advice to the town board of commissioners.
Steve, I'm trying to cut in here for a little bit.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question initially was, what does the Park and Rec Committee do next Wednesday?
That was what Tony called and asked today.
Yeah, that's the initial
Yeah.
step one.
Right.
1A, B, or whatever the first step. In order to solve a problem, you have to define all the options. You have to define the problem before you can solve it. And to me, it would be for them to come up with a list of where they think their responsibilities are. Where are all the items where we're involved in, and what can we do to give you advice on it, which is what they're an advisory board. Their job is to give us advice. It's not to tell us what to do, it's to give us advice. And, I mean, a job for them to do, or Natalie to direct them, is to tell us where you're good at and where exactly do you need to, we get involved in. What's it, give us a spreadsheet. I mean, that's what we want, right? Which is
So if-
probably 1,000 spreadsheets.
So if you gave this to Tony and said, could you, next meeting, figure out whether or not, what does this mean to you specifically?
Yeah, exactly. You
So
tell us
basically, here's
tell us
kind,
what you think you should be doing.
yeah, this is kind of the overall philosophical view. Can you get specific?
If I give this to Tony specifically, you said fix Nesbitt Park. Then I want him to say Nesbitt Park fixes. This as an advisory group is the bullet form of what we think needs to be fixed in Nesbitt Park to get it to a point where it's usable, it's fixed, it's a good park to use for now and in the future.
But I even think as a,
Advisory.
but I'm not even sure as a board why we would have them looking at what it takes to fix Nesbit Park. They're not experts.
That's a subset of the other, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
that-
We need to, give us advice, this is one of our jobs, is tell us.
The advice
what-
is fix Nesbit Park.
What kind of, what do you think needs to go into it, in Nesbit Park? Tell us what you think needs to go in there. And then we'll pick and choose whatever's going in there, or get a consultant to tell us what's best, what's needed.
But I think that's the point. When you look at their work plan, they've said, fix Nesbit Park, and here's some of the items it would take. And by the way, more importantly than anything else, the WAA probably has more of an input because they use it more frequently and have more citizens and the like using it. When you look at fix Town Creek Park, there's some very specific things. Their advice is get it fixed. Now, okay, Natalie, go get it fixed. I mean, and you work with the experts to get it fixed, the consultants or whoever you bring in. You work with Warren to get the finances, et cetera. It isn't them actually sitting there project managing Natalie, which is designed the 34 acres. I don't know that any of the 9 have any expertise to design 34 acres, a cross-country trail or anything like that. Have they taken it far enough? I'm as intrigued as, rather than design, what are the needs that we have? We got 141 acres. We got a lot of land sitting here. What needs, do we have a needs assessment? Can they be leading those kinds of things? A la what's in here? Have they assessed the services that we provide? Really, we're providing a lot of services through third parties, or, those kind of things. When you read their work plan, it's fix Nesbit Park, or here's 34 acres and we have $636,000. To me, that's irresponsible on our part to think a committee's gonna go tell us how to spend the money. And go tell Natalie how to spend the money. That's what we hired. What the hell do we need a park and rec department for if some committee's going to meet once a month to say, here's where the damn money's gonna go? That's irresponsible on our part. I'm sorry, that's just exactly how I feel about it. So, while we allow them to get there, if that's the consensus of the board, that's great, but I, for one, will tell you, to give an advisory board $1.6 million and let them think they have control over it, that's just wrong. That's Natalie's job. And that's Warren's job to hold Natalie accountable. That's my view. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would agree with you. We were looking for the Parks and Rec Committee to tell us what we need for future work in the town, what the problems are with the existing parks, and they can even make suggestions as to what should be done.
Needs.
Yeah, needs, just the
Needs
needs.
assessment.
They bring those needs back to us, we work them through the budget cycle, and then from that point forward, they're with the Parks and Rec Department. But it's a needs survey, it's a survey. What does the town, what do we need, what do we want? And we have to make that clear to them. If there's something that this board thinks we want to do, like, we need to go out and find more land to do, if we want to have a soccer field that's lighted and we want it to have 12 fields, we might do something like that. But in the meantime, they just need to determine what the needs are, what the problems are, and bring them back to us.
Can
Yes, sir.
I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Okay. So Commissioner Burrow mentioned some professional help. So maybe a procedure might be something similar like we did with the COG. Go out, look at the consulting community for local government and Parks and Rec, solicit some proposals to help us through an exercise. Let the Park and Rec Advisory Board interview those folks and then bring a recommendation to you on who we might use to find. These should be, and it's not just what's customary in the industry per se, but this was what is customary and would work for Waxhaw. Because we don't do programming, we don't have many parks, we don't do a lot of things, and that's one of the challenges.
Why
There's
they
not a
deviate.
whole lot of that there, so.
That's right.
But I think that might be a way forward.
Everybody okay with that? Commissioner Stewart? Are you okay?
I do want to say, I think the key word is advisory. And perhaps that has gotten skewed
That's fair.
is when it comes to what you're talking about, the money. We're going to advise you on how to spend the money rather than advise you on what we need and allow that money allocation to go into what we choose. Because like you said, we can choose all, or we can use part, or we can choose as a board not to do any of it. But the advisory is what's coming in, and we need to look at that. And the difference between advisory and decision makers is something that needs to be clear.
Well stated. Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a question to you, Brendan, just for a learning point, just thought process for me. Would you agree or think that somewhere along the lines, the process of advisory has gone off the rails as far as, there's the reference to the downtown, thank you. As far as we make an we advise something and the town board doesn't listen to us, so why have us at all? Do you think, not just with any particular board, but with all of the boards?
There are feelings out there in different boards and some boards that are no longer boards, yes.
So how do we,
I've heard that.
and right, and I have too. I actually attended one of the previous meetings before the group disbanded, and one of the board member, or the committee members said to me, well, we made the decision, y'all need to follow it. And to me, I think folks are equating advisory board, public input, and the public input says this, the advisory board says this, so we must just give it the blessing versus say no, or let's look at it, or it's not what actually is going to happen, regardless if it's 1.6 million or whatever it is, it's still an advisement. And I think that there's a disconnect that folks think, well, no, we're not advising, we're telling you what to do.
Well, that's what I was talking about, the difference between an advisory board and giving us good recommendations where it comes to the board finally and we make a decision, just like was written here. We may adopt all or part or any or none. But I think the money, it isn't, the advisory part is not, you have $400,000, so pick out all the things you're going to advise that will fit in that $400,000. I don't think that that's an advisory portion of their responsibility. What do you think?
I would agree with you.
I agree.
It's advice.
They could point out which was what they thought was most important.
Right.
To spend on first, but
Right.
we're gonna make the decision on where it goes.
And it,
Not at this time, but it has been done in the past, because that's basically how they started. We didn't have a department, and that's how it happened. It didn't roll to change to the new system.
So again, a universal change across all of our boards, advisory committees, again, with the new manager in place, the new budget process, everything we've got, we have failed to go back and readdress the boards to say, yes, we still need you, but it's different rules. It's a different way we're playing, that this is going to occur versus the way it's always happened in the past.
so and we can move on to the Main Street here, but I think, and take Warren up on his suggestion, but I think there's one key point that he made there. We don't have programming and the like that they can get their arms around. The only thing we have are fields. And we let the train move rather quickly with the downtown park without ever curtailing the expectation on that. We let an expectation get out there of $8 to $9 million. And that's from a while ago. And in defense of that committee, they're sitting there going, been on it for a while, and we haven't finished anything. I'm feeling frustrated. And the only thing that they can finish is a park. And that, can understand how they feel about it. You know, that's a tough one. We gotta they have to accomplish something.
I understand how they feel, and I think it's more, it's frustration, but I think it's more disappointment.
Fair.
And, I've been here this long, or I'm new, or I don't see any movement, and here we are this time, and I'm not pinpointing anybody or pointing any fingers. I think we have a problem with all the committees and the boards that we need to solidify. But I would say it's disappointment, because these people are so passionate. They wouldn't be there, they wouldn't be putting their hours in. And, you know, I know most of them, and even on the other boards, and they wouldn't be putting their time in, raising their hand and say, I volunteer, unless they're so passionate about what they're doing. And
I agree with you.
appreciate all of the work that they do, even sometimes when it gets a little hairy, sometimes passionate people get that way. I'm that way. But, I appreciate the work that they do and the volunteerism that they do and their advisory part and saying, I'd like this, or can you do this, or we need to do this. They just need, I think all of them need to be reined in, but always remember that they're volunteering, they're helping their citizens, and I appreciate what they do when they come to those meetings and sit through them.
Yeah, and Commissioner Stewart, you raise a good point. As we bring new people on and people leave through natural attrition, we've got to go back and thank people for the job they've done. And we can't let that fall off. You know, we've talked about end-of-year reception, et cetera, and somehow those things, you know, we just got to make sure that we're saying thank you. Commissioner Stewart brings up a very good point on that.
And I have heard people say, not just in my committees, but I've heard other ones say, why bother? And that's
Right.
the last thing I want to hear a volunteer say is, why bother?
Why bother?
Leave. That's sad to me, that if we reach that point, which is why we're spending so much time talking about this.
Yep. Okay, we got about 20 some odd minutes left or so before we take a break for tonight. Main Street Advisory Board. Okay. So just from a timeline standpoint, I don't know the exact number of applications that have been received, but they've been received. The OAC has been familiarizing themselves with applications. Kurt would like to get the ball rolling as the Main Street manager. And so from a timeline standpoint, if we can make it work, we need to make it work. What they would like to do is have a work session where the OAC, the Main Street manager, and the board review candidates. Obviously, the board will get the candidate packets ahead of time so we can see them, and have a very candid discussion as a group as to the Main Street manager who knows the most about the program and where it's going. The OAC, which has been educated on it, and us, sitting there talking about the viability of the candidates. Obviously, the board would reach a consensus on the initial slate of candidates and who they want to put forward, and then the commissioners would appoint that initial slate. And ideally, if we can get it done within the next 2 weeks, that would be ideal. In anticipation of that, a straw person vision, I'm going to take you through it, was captured. The double-digit number of plans all had a different twist as to what they thought Main Street and downtown would be. And so those were consolidated for an initial vision statement that the Main Street Advisory Board can vet and argue about and discuss, and then bring back to the board for a final validation point. And then they were asked to, we made the comment that the original boundary was just way too big, and so you're going to see in a minute a refined boundary that narrows this down to the commercial side of really what Main Street's about. So how many plans do you see on this chart? You see every one of them had a vision for Main Street and downtown, and so just to get the ball rolling for as we select candidates, and then those candidates start vetting a vision. This was and working with Main Street, so Kurt gets advice and counsel from the Department of Commerce, the Main Street component that's within the Department of Commerce. Here's what you got to do for Main Street. It's pretty defined, just like the planning board and the COG. It's a very defined program. And so with that, you got a vision statement, a straw person vision statement that will get vetted and brought back by the committee to the board as they look at it and do their work once we name a committee. A couple interesting things in there because it has some tentacles. We're pedestrian friendly. That's in conflict with getting everybody down 16 and down 75 as quick as possible. So how that vision works with what we do on transportation, and Dennis Rory and the engineer and the planning and development department need, obvious, this is where the synergy and the teamwork comes together. But nonetheless, that's the consolidated vision from those plans, just as a starting point. We all know the current boundary. That was the original overlay district. When you look at it purely from an economic and a Main Street definition, though, the boundary becomes much smaller. Look at where the commercial/retail entities are coming down 16, the green space on either side of 75. But the real starting point would be the Nivens Price building on one side and the park on the other, and then bring that across to obviously incorporate the mill and Maxwell's, et cetera. But again, not final, but a more realistic view of what a Main Street initial focus could be to get a discussion going with when the new advisory board is appointed, to begin the discussion, begin discussing what the focus is, how do you go about doing it, what are the things that we can bring in, et cetera, et cetera. The thought process that was at play here in terms of first quarter of or the next 3 months of activities as we name a group and then get them in place and then actually have them do some work. So take that vision, vet it, establish it, that working vision, bring it back to the board. This is where we are. Is it okay? Vet, establish the new boundary. What's the pros and cons? Here's a tweak we'd like to make. Here's a tweak we don't. Maybe it's too far. Maybe it's not enough. But again, here's pros and cons, and bring back to the board a final boundary. With that boundary and vision, then actually do what are the issues and challenges, a current state view of downtown. We have lots of views from 2010 on as to downtown. Some of the things have been done. Some of them are incorporated into the comp plan. Others, as we learned in the bridge document, policies haven't been touched. And then what the thought process was, again, following the recommendation of the Main Street organization out of the Commerce Department, you really need to do a current SWOT analysis. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And then develop a set of actions and strategies for evaluation by the board, obviously for funding. Get the work groups in place, and then begin to get regular work done with regular reports on a quarterly basis to the Board of Commissioners. To give you a perspective on, how does some of this stuff work? When make recommendations regarding unfunded commitments, there's 3 right there. Are we really going to do anything with the Millennial Task Force recommendation? What about the downtown park? How high of a priority is that? How do you coordinate that with existing projects? TAP grant and streetlights, private sector construction projects, and then begin to, working with Union County where appropriate, the economic development group there, what is the economic development strategy for downtown? Recruitment, retention, expansion, incentives. I mean, we all know the space problems. We all know the ebb and flow. Is there any infill development? Yes, we're challenged with water and sewer right now, but that's a temporary thing. Are there partnerships to be had out there? One thing that you know about this area, there's a ton of grants that could be looked at, but you have to have a cohesive thought process and plan to do it and to apply. And then obviously we have the Nivens Price and other things. How does that all fit in here? Where does the pedestrian mall fit in, if it does at all? How do you get across 16 if you're trying to get everybody through town traffic-wise, et cetera? So that's kind of like hey, we need to get started, and this is what starting would look like. And the key step here is bringing the group, the OAC, us, and the Main Street manager together to just sit down and review the candidates, get the packages in our hands, and they will have done their work independently, and talk about it, and talk about the candidates, given some of this. This is what we're looking for. This is how it's going to flow. Are these the right people, kind of thing, and have that discussion so we can get started. I'll pause and see what you guys think, or I will say this. Our Main Street manager, working with the Main Street organization and the Department of Commerce, has really provided some guideposts, just like the COG is providing on the planning board, so we stay aligned. And so while we don't have to go invent it, we have to really make sure we fine-tune this vision over the next month, fine-tune the map, et cetera, and make sure we're comfortable so they can get focused. We got something for Kurt in his performance plan so Warren can evaluate him. So I'll pause and entertain thoughts, questions. Is it a matter of just getting the work session scheduled, the packets out, that kind of stuff?
I think the work session is very important, but I think, again, like with the other boards and committees, we probably have a leg up on this one because of the Department of Commerce and because of the Main Street Committee, the State Main Street Committee, that could probably help us decide what we want this committee to do. And just do we start them off with 2 or 3 different projects after we get them picked and formed and so forth? How do we go about defining what we want them to do?
Well, the key step, if you reverse re-engineer this, is you're throwing darts if we don't do the vision, the boundary, the challenges, and the SWOT analysis. So that work's got to get done before we can then start to steer. And it's kind of like what Commissioner Warner was saying. What are the needs for Park and Rec? Well, these are the needs, and then we can select project or those kind of things.
We're going to have the luxury of a survey coming up soon, which will really feed into this also.
Yep.
Feed into all of the committees.
Feeds into all of them. That's a
Now,
good
the
reminder.
project as far as the TAP grant, that's already decided that's going to be, correct? Or is that part of this?
It's pretty much decided, yeah.
It's decided, yeah. How it impacts everything else, though, it becomes important.
Who keeps the master plan? Who's the man behind the curtain?
At some point in time, maybe we can consolidate the 17 down. Does this make sense? Are we ready to take the next step and get I think we are, but I wanted to get in front of you. Let's go look at the candidates and go. Does that make, okay.
Good.
All right, so we'll get that scheduled. Now, can I work with Kurt and the OAC and us to try to find a mutual date? Yeah. Okay. Get that going. All right. That's everything. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Earl already has.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.